Mandy Smiley, the Friendly Podcast Guide. Every week, I put out an episode about a specific podcast to help you figure out if it's your next favorite podcast. Those episodes come out on Tuesdays. I also put out another episode each Thursday that's a little more personal, like how I'm using podcasts in my own life, or a list of podcasts that I like for the season we're in, or something like that. This is one of those episodes, and this week it's all about national parks podcasts. I love going to national parks with my family when we travel, and so, of course, I also love to learn more about the parks through podcasts. The first National Parks podcast is called America's National Parks Podcast. This show not only talks about individual parks, it also talks about current national park news, history about the national park system, and the animals that live at the parks. Y'all know that I love a short podcast, and this one is around 20 minutes long, so it's at the top of my list. Recently, they've had episodes about Shenandoah, the history of North American elk in our national parks, and America's Outdoor Recreation Act, just to name a few. The next National Parks podcast on the list for today is National Parks Traveler Podcast. This podcast goes more in depth on topics surrounding national parks and protected areas. Each episode is 45 minutes to an hour long, with topics ranging from the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory to exploring the Oregon Trail. With more than 200 episodes, you're bound to find several that pique your interest and help you learn about the beautiful national parks we have around the country. Before I tell you about more National Parks podcasts, we're going to take a quick break to talk about my guide to kid podcasts. One of my favorite parenting tools is kid podcasts. I use them when I'm running errands with the kiddos to keep them from complaining the whole time, or when I need a mom break, I'll just grab an easy activity like coloring pages or a sensory bin, turn on a kid podcast, and the kids will be entertained for at least half an hour. I know that kid podcasts would help you in your life too, which is why I made a guide to kid podcasts. There are 8 categories ranging from science to mindfulness to audio drama, with at least 3 podcasts in each category. There are 27 podcasts in total on the guide. I've listened to each of the podcasts so I can attest to them being kid-friendly. And I put my email at the bottom of the guide so that if you try a couple with your kids and none of them are a good fit, you can email me and I will personally help you find a kid podcast that works for your littles and you. You can grab this guide at the link in the show notes. This last National Parks podcast is definitely a different vibe from the first 2 that I've talked about. The 2 friends that host this show, Cassie and Danielle, describe it as a podcast for the morbid outdoor enthusiast. It's kind of like a mix of true crime and exploring the national parks, with haunting stories about the crazy stuff that can happen in national parks. Each episode is about an hour long, and just as a warning, some of the content is scary and can be gruesome. So if you're not into that, this may not be the podcast for you. But I will say that I don't like true crime podcasts. I get nightmares way too easily to voluntarily add fuel to that fire. But I still really enjoyed the 2-part series Cassie and Danielle did on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Capitol Reef National Park. Cassie and Danielle have a wonderful rapport with each other, and it really is just a really fun podcast if you're into that kind of thing. So if you're planning on visiting any national parks this summer, or you just want to learn more about the beautiful outdoors, I highly recommend listening to one or all of these podcasts to heighten your excitement and help you expand your knowledge of nature. Also, if you want another tool in your parenting tool belt, I highly recommend grabbing my kid podcast guide. Talk to you soon.